Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Wisher-Doms. I'm the Vice President of U.S. Development with Mayshad Choice. Thank you so much for spending your Thursday morning with us. We welcome all of our friends and advocates and associates and colleagues from around the country and around the world today to bring you an informative conversation on all things related to women and money during the time of COVID-19. We are Mayshad Choice. Please visit us at joinmayshad.com. We are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, championing women by connecting them to each other and to the causes, companies, and organizations that champion equity for women. As many of you know, we last year launched a series of live events, bringing really informative content, expert speakers, and networking opportunities for women in the New York City area. And we're thrilled to announce that we've gone digital. So we're now bringing you 5 different series each and every week centered around women and money, which is what you're going to be enjoying with us here today. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. We host on Monday afternoons, an incredible opportunity for women just to come get together, share a cocktail, and chat about all things related to where they are right now in COVID-19 pertaining to their professional and personal well-being. And then every Monday afternoon, we bring you Dr. Risa Reiger, a clinical psychologist who helps us set up our week for success. Next week, we're thrilled to announce our workshop series. So we've partnered with incredible companies, entrepreneurs, and businesses who will be delivering workshop sessions related to all things you need to know to stay fresh, relevant, and current in how you manage your career, not just now during COVID-19, but after the fact as we continue to think and reimagine the new world of work. So today we're here to talk to you about women and money and finance. And I have 2 incredible women here with us today from Brown Advisory, Randi Engelbrecht and Danielle Barrett, who will be speaking to us in just a second. And it's incredible, as we all know, what's happening right now just globally. And as we peel back the layers and start to look at the fear and the uncertainty of the times, not just from a health perspective, but also in the sense of how we're managing our households, how we're managing our careers, and what does that mean for today in the moment, but then as we think about as we rebuild the future. So this morning, every Thursday morning, we announce the new unemployment claims for the week before we kick off our conversation. And yet again, staggering numbers ahead of us. We're up to now over 16 million jobless claims here in the US alone. The Federal Reserve in response could pump over $2.3 trillion into the economy to help companies, local and state governments. And we know that the stock market has taken some pretty wild rides. And the emotional tugs on all of our heartstrings, no matter if we're corporate executives, business owners, entrepreneurs, is quite tremendous right now. So we're here to clear up some of that confusion with you today and provide you tactical and practical advice and tips for how to weather the storm, and then to ensure that we're really focused on the future as well. So I'm really thrilled and honored to introduce Randi, who is a partner and private client relationship advisor at Brown. Welcome, Randi. And Danielle Barrett, our private client advisor at Brown as well. And also, sidebar, both Randi and Danielle are investors in Mayshad Choice. And so we're incredibly thrilled and honored to be here having this conversation with both of you today. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Randi and Danielle. Randi, I'll start this question for you, and then Danielle, please feel free to add as well. You know, so as business owners, like what we had said, business owners, executives, entrepreneurs, in this time, there's so much uncertainty and so much fear. And we're all concerned about how to manage our money during this time. And there's a lot of conflicting advice out there pertaining to everything from the employment claims to the stock market wild rides to just the uncertainty of how to manage our businesses if we are business owners, or how to think of our career if we are corporate executives. What is some of your advice for really how should we be focusing our time right now? Randi, I'll let you start.
Okay. Good morning, Jan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for spending time with us this morning. It's a really good question. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. I wish we had a crystal ball to see when this was all going to be over so we could get back to our normal lives. And we'll talk a little bit about what normal means. And maybe there's not so many bad things that come out of our new normal. But I think when we're thinking about talking with clients about their fears, of course, we cannot tell them when this is going to be over. We can't tell them, what impact the health crisis or the financial crisis will have on them personally. So what we're really doing is empowering them to take control of their finances. And Right now, we're telling people have 12 to 18 months worth of spending in your pocket, in a bank account that's protected by FDIC and not in the markets where it's so volatile. And having that on hand will allow you, one, to not stop looking at your portfolio, because really and Danielle can talk to this a little bit more, we really tell people to just not look at their portfolio day to day. It can get really consuming, and have negative impact on your daily life and how you feel, and a lot of other things. So if you have the spending put aside, and even if you don't have that 12 to 18 months of spending, looking at your expenses and saying, what in the short term can I really cut back on? I've cut back on so much, just not commuting to the city and having lunches in the city every day. So there's a lot we can do to figure out what is best for our expenses, both short and long term. And then just having conversations with the people who are managing whatever money you have, to make sure that you understand where those periods of volatility, should we have more? I mean, the markets are going up and down every day, again, not knowing when this is going to end. Being able to have those, really candid conversations with your advisors about risk and where you're comfortable around risk. And if your portfolio goes down X%, can you sleep at night? And that's a real conversation people should be having. And Danielle and I talk about this a lot, about how to alleviate clients from really looking at the portfolio and really, really just stressing about it. So, Danielle, I'd love for you to share your thoughts around that as well.
Yeah, I think, Randi, you hit on all of the key points here. When I think about investors in this market, I sort of put them into three buckets. And the first is those investors who had a long-term plan. And if you have a long-term plan, the best thing you can do now is really stick to it and believe in that plan you put together. As Randi mentioned, make sure that you have that cash buffer on hand so that you don't have to pull money out of the market at a time that wouldn't be advantageous to you. The second bucket of people are those where they may have a long-term plan, but the long-term plan is blown up. And long-term money is now short-term money. You need access to funds. And I think for those people, this time is even scarier than what a lot of us are talking about. And there are additional ways that you can try to feel a little bit more in control at this time. And a chunk of that, as Randi said, if you do have cash on hand, now's a time to really think about your expenses. Make sure that you're being really thoughtful about where you spend and where you think you can save. And there's also a lot of other ways, if you have to, that you can dig into resources you've saved away. If you have a 401k, if you have an IRA, part of what the government has done in their stimulus package has given you the ability to access some of those resources and reduce the penalties of doing so. And again, that's a last resort, but that's, if you had a long-term plan and it blew up. And finally, there's those people who didn't have a plan. Maybe you just invested a little bit here or there. If you're in those people, and I know we'll get to this later and how to think about this time as an opportunity, but now's a really great time to think about making a plan.
Thank you, Randi. Thank you, Danielle. It's interesting that when we think about like this moment in time and how different it was just 1 to 2 to 3 months ago. And Randi, one of the things that you said about just cash reserves and thinking about cash reserves differently, that's different than what you would normally recommend, right? Pre-corona, in the sense of just the number of months of cash that one should have on hand.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been, sort of unprecedented times, right? So we're saying, we may not need that much cash on hand, but it's really good to have it because it gives you that safety net and it gives you that comfort of things you can control, other than toilet paper. So it's that what can I control in my universe and what can I not control? And having the cash on hand allows you, as Danielle said, not to worry about your portfolio. I have a hard time not looking at mine every day, but I found that the less I look at it, the better I feel. And because I know, they're paper losses, right? They're not losses I've realized. I'm not selling things out of my portfolio, and we're trying not to sell things out of our clients' portfolios. We're trying to just maintain that long-term discipline and to say, let's just ride this out. And there's so many reasons for doing that. And we're going to talk a little bit about a fidelity study that shows why that's so important.
It's interesting. So much of what we think about right now is around what do we have control over? Do we have control over, Randy, you're right. Do we have control over our ability to buy just simple basic commodities like toilet paper? What do we have control over in the sense of understanding? Randy, really good point around, you're not going into the city every day. I'm not going into the city every day right now either. And it's incredible how quickly things like, $20 to $25 lunches 5 days a week really do add up. And I think it's just understanding that knowledge is power, and being able for yourself and for your household to be able to have a clearer picture of where your money is coming in, where your money is going right now, perhaps even clearer than before. And so this really taps into kind of the mind games that we have around this period of time too, and the slippery slope that we can find ourselves in those holes that once the mind starts to play out worst case scenario, what that looks like. So as we know, this is an incredible moment of extreme suffering for a lot of people, emotionally, physically, from a health perspective, and just emotionally and mentally. But then also there's an incredible conversation that's happening around how this time is also an opportunity. And so Danielle, would you talk a bit about, from your perspective, how you're seeing kind of the psychology of that mind game persona play out for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to remember is that it would be irrational to bet against the fact that we don't figure this out. So we're going to. It's really then a question of how long does it take? How bad does this get? Before we have it figured out and everyone can kind of go back to business as usual. And certainly when it comes to our clients, it's easy to watch the news all day and just be confused, feel out of control like we've talked about, and not really know what action to take. And so the first piece of advice I've had to almost every client is, to the extent that you can turn off the TV, do it, because there's not a ton of new news coming out right now. And to the extent that you can reframe this period, for all that there are horrible things going on, and no one is suggesting that we ignore that, but view this as an opportunity. And we'll get to sort of the market opportunity, but the way I think about it is, I'm currently living back at home with my parents. Like, I haven't done this in 15 years, and we're having family dinners and we're talking about what's going on in the world. And I think for so many of our listeners and people that are part of this network, this is a really unique time that chances are you're not going to get with your family or your kids or your parents or your friends, even if it's digitally. Virtual happy hours are certainly the new thing across the board. So try to focus on some of the really interesting opportunities that are coming out of this. And I really think that there's going to be a lot of them.
Thank you, Danielle, for that. I think it's such an interesting point, because we also talk quite a bit just around the human touch component of what's happening right now. And given the fact that we're all at home, we're all remote working, we're all under the same roof with, people that we may not have normally lived with or haven't lived with for a very long time. And Danielle, you're a new mom as well. So it must be an incredible experience for you to be able to have that extended family around you during this period of time too. But for many of us, we don't have the luxury. For those of us who are still living in Manhattan or in big cities, or for those of us that, are single or, on our own, or used to being, as an extrovert myself, I can tell you it's incredibly difficult being at home and having this face-to-face be a main face-to-face touch point for me during the day, which I love, but it's not the same as, embracing someone in a networking event with a hug, right? So talk to us a bit about how that loss of human connection has impacted the work that you're both doing, and what are you doing now to make sure that you are staying in close contact, touch to touch with your colleagues and your clients and your associates too, and what can we learn from that as we think through how to navigate this for ourselves over the next X number of months?
Yeah, Randi, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. It's something that we've talked about for the last 5 weeks. How do we stay connected? And I think the novelty of not commuting, or just the novelty of being able to have more time at home, has certainly worn off. And now it's, like you said, Jan, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I think you're feeling this separation a bit more than you would ever normally would in any other circumstance. I'll touch on the client example, and then maybe Danielle can talk about what we're doing with colleagues. But, for clients, I think it's made a lot of us really better listeners and really great listeners, because we spent the first few weeks of all of this happening with talking about the markets, talking about globally what's happening, talking about China, talking about what's happening in the U.S., the numbers, the unemployment numbers, the health numbers, all of this. And like Danielle said, there's not a lot of new news, right? There's numbers that are bumping up, but there's a lot of, every time they say breaking news, I'm thinking that's everything they do, but it's not really breaking news anymore. We've been a bit oversaturated. So our client conversations have turned towards, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you all healthy still? So I think, it's a lot of listening. It's a lot more connection. And I think when we do go back to whatever the new normal is, because I don't think we just flip a switch and go back to life as we knew it. But I don't think that's all a bad thing either. I think we will come out valuing personal relationships, whether they're clients or colleagues or family members, much deeper than we did before. So I think our touch points have been greater, and our ability to use resources to try to have those connections have certainly been more creative, right? Just here we are today talking in this forum, and a month and a half ago, we were at the Mayshad event with 70 people in a room. So it certainly has changed the landscape of how we connect. Danielle, would love for you to share what we're doing with colleagues, because I think that, and outreach for clients, because I think that that's pretty unique.
Yeah, so as a firm, something that we always did before any of this started was we would have morning meetings for the whole firm. You would be in your office with everyone, and on our screen, we would have every other office. So you could look at the screen and see colleagues from all of our 12 offices across the country and the globe, because we have a couple offices internationally. And it was a really nice way for 25 minutes a day for everyone to just come together. And that's something that we've maintained every single day. We all come together. It's preferred, if you can, that you do it over video so that you still see everyone's voice. Mike, who's our CEO, in normal times would email someone if it was their birthday. Amazing to me how he remembers to do that with 700 colleagues. But now what he does every morning is, if it's your birthday, he announces it to the whole firm. And it's sort of a nice way to just make people feel good, make them feel connected and recognized. And for our office, we're doing everything from virtual happy hours to one-on-one calls with colleagues who you probably don't interact with day to day. We intentionally tried to split it up so that you're touching base with colleagues who you probably might not know as well, to check in, see how they're doing. How are they finding workload at this time? Are they feeling lonely? Do they have what they need personally and professionally to succeed at what they're doing? Randi also led the charge on our internal CRG at Brown Advisory to bring women together as colleagues. And one of the things that they've done that I love is put together small working groups of 4 or 5 women across the firm, different offices, different areas of the firm, to just have a virtual lunch together every couple weeks and talk about what your challenges are. And the group that I'm a part of, we had our first one last week, and it was amazing. It was women that I probably in my day-to-day would have never engaged with. And we had really honest and interesting conversations about what we're all going through. So I think now is a time to really come together. And I think just finally, what I'd say is so interesting about this time is that technology is so great that it allows us to get through this. We couldn't do this without technology. We couldn't come to you right now and share these thoughts without it. But I think coming out of this time, there's just going to be so much more emphasis and importance around direct human contact, because we're all craving it. And I personally really hope that sticks.
It's interesting that we think a lot about the ways in which technology can divide us, right? And the oversaturation of content and the ways in which technology often prohibits us from having those close interactions. But what I find interesting is that particularly right now here during COVID-19, I'm finding that because we're all remote working from home, and that the line between the professional and personal is blurred to even a greater extent than what it ever was before. But it also sounds like it's serving as an opportunity in the professional space for us to get more real with each other, right? And to be able to have greater levels of and more meaningful conversations just around getting to know some of your colleagues and clients at a different sort of personal level, because we're all going through something horrendous together. And to be able to get to know and to be, Randy, to your point around just asking you, like, are you healthy? How are you feeling? And that's something we would have taken for granted before. And are you finding that, for yourselves as well as you navigate through this time?
Yeah, again, it's something that we all think about every day, right? There's lots of time to think now, more so than ever. Danielle mentioned the CRG, which is a colleague resource group, which is focused on through our D&I diversity inclusion program platform. It's a women's group called Making Her Story. So wanted to just clarify that. And I am also part of a small group, and we just listened to Brene Brown's Unlocking Us, Unlocking You. Sorry about that. I think it's Unlocking Us. And the first podcast she did was on vulnerability and something called FFT. So I would encourage you to listen to it, because it is about letting your guard down and being vulnerable and owning and naming what you're feeling to be able to tackle it and move forward. And it's a 30-minute podcast, and it's so great. I know she's done a couple of them. She does them every Wednesday, but it's her first podcast she did under the Unlocking Us series. And it really helped me. And then, because I feel like if you don't help yourself, you can't help others. So there's a big component to how do I make sure that I am whole? And there's times I'm not whole, but then someone else will lift me up, whether it's my family member, my husband, or my colleagues. But I think Danielle's right. We're going to come back to this normal environment, or our new normal, realizing how important human connection is, and not so much on your phones. And I hope one day when we all get back to the city, that we see people walking down the street not staring at their phones, and really just taking in the environment of which we've been so deprived of.
That's really interesting, and I hadn't really thought of it that way. Excuse me, in the sense of, because, and I'm sure that this is true, and for our other viewers that are outside of the greater New York City area, is that so much of our time is spent with the phones. And you see people when they're walking down the street or on the trains in the morning. I remember a friend of mine saying, "Oh, Jan, you're going to love riding Metro North into the city every day, because you'll be able to meet amazing women and have incredible conversations, and you'll be able to meet your neighbors." But honestly, that was 20 years ago when he was coming into the city himself. And now we're so obsessed with making sure that we're staying connected all the time. I do think that now, in this moment of time, is an opportunity for a great reflection in whatever space and place our minds are in, to be able to think about what do we want it to look like on the other side, right? And taking ownership and autonomy and responsibility to ensuring that we're all part of the individual solution for helping us get to that other side. So, which leads me to my next question for both of you. So it's interesting in the sense of before COVID-19, the field of fintech was burgeoning incredibly. And we find that, for many consumers of financial products, there was often kind of this distinction in their mind in the sense of what technology could do for them versus what having the face-to-face interaction could do for one. And from the financial services industry, as we know that other industries like retail, the sharing economy, real estate, co-working will be dramatically changed from here on out forever. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, how do you see the financial services industry changing? And how does that impact the work that you will do in the future?
So I think that, and we sort of already touched on a piece of this, when we think about how we interact with our clients, truthfully, not much is probably going to change that much. We already really try to spend a lot of time talking face to face with our clients, understanding their mentality, what they're worried about, what keeps them up at night, what does their family look like. And I think that will, for us, probably stay fairly consistent across our industry. I think that you probably will see a shift toward that. I'm not saying that things like robo-advisors, that's always going to exist. There's always going to be a market for that. But I think there's a large subsector of investors who are going to want more communication that's face to face. And particularly, I think for female investors, they're going to just want more and more knowledge. They're going to want to understand how to make good investment decisions. And, what do you do in times like this? And how can I be the most educated that I can be? Randi, what else would you add?
I think you covered it. Our new normal, I think, for Brown Advisory will be pretty much the same, and things won't change the way we communicate. Although I think we will value that much better. I think we talked about that. So, but I do think the landscape of how we do business will change, and the industry will shift, which again, I don't think is a bad thing for this industry to value that much more highly.
We know that from the most recent data that out of those who have filed unemployment claims so far, over 60% of them are actually women. And I'm wondering, as women during this time period step back, take some time to reflect and think about how to perhaps reinvent themselves, either within the same industry or opening up their own business or launching a new venture or accepting a role in a corporate position that's outside of what, where they came from in the past. Do you see financial services and the financial services industry being able to respond possibly to women who are looking to have a different sort of career, and is financial services an avenue for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure if it's financial services industry in particular, or it's just a whole shift of what we do and our mindset of how we think about supporting one another. I know with this whole CARES Act, there's a lot of support around small businesses and making sure that they're supported and they're sustained, so that when we do come back, there is jobs and there is economy in those small businesses. So I think that the engagement around how can we be more helpful in those situations, right, outside of maybe what our core business focus is. So our core business focus is portfolio management. Outside of that, of course, we are engaging with clients at a level that we have not engaged with before. We're right in the middle of between them and our bank, our partnership with our banking industry, to try to help facilitate those loans and try to help facilitate all that paperwork and really walk through that with them and disseminate some of that information that's really been confusing so far. Hopefully this next round of stimulus will be a little bit easier to manage. But again, it's everyone's first time doing this. So, patience is definitely a virtue and definitely warranted during this time.
Let's talk about the fidelity study, which I thought was really fascinating in the sense of the discovery around client accounts that perform the best. Danielle, do you want to talk to us about the fidelity study and the outcomes of that?
Yeah, so the study was fairly comical, to be honest. In 2014, Fidelity looked at which accounts had performed best over a 20-year period. And what they found first was that the best performing accounts were from clients who had forgot they had them. So there had been no contact with the clients over the 20-year period. And secondly, they were from clients who had actually passed away. So not as funny, but just odd and crazy. And I think what it shows you is a lot of what we've been saying. While set it and forget it isn't exactly the sexiest investment mentality, the truth is that it actually works. It works to have a plan, to stick to a plan, and to not make panic decisions in times like this, which is really easy to do. You see your account go down, there's a lot of negative headlines. You think, should I pull out now because it's going to get worse? And you sort of play this back and forth with yourself, with your advisor if you have one, with friends. And the data really shows at the end of the day, just do nothing. As Randi said earlier, don't look at it and try to step away and do something else.
Yeah, I would just add that, yes, this is great. In this time, we should definitely be, not looking at it every day, not focused on making any major shifts. I think when active management, like what we do every day, does come into play and is really important, is when a certain, emerging markets is taking a hit for some reason. The shift out of an asset allocation is really important to have somebody on top of that for you. In this market, when everything is just kind of going crazy, it is good to just take a step back and not worry about it and let the markets just sort of rebound on its own. Because if you do get out and you don't reallocate, right now there's nowhere to reallocate to for better performance. But if there was a time where you could reallocate to a sector for better performance, you want to take advantage of that. Here's an unprecedented time where you need to, like 2008, where you need to step back and just say, I'm going to let the market ride out and I'm going to just hold on tight like a roller coaster. Because if you do get out and you miss, I think it was, if you miss, Danielle, help me with this, but if you miss the 10 best days in the market over a certain period, you missed all of the run up to get back to even.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was perfectly said. And I think, the times to really make broad changes to your portfolio are, as Randi said, a particular asset class has really changed in terms of valuation, or honestly, your personal circumstances have changed. Your risk profile looks different than it did before. Those are reasons to kind of talk to whomever you're working with, or really think, how do I make sure that the plan in place makes the most sense? But markets like this are not that time.
We have a couple of questions from our audience, and please, for all of you with us here today, we encourage you to type in your questions and I'll read them out loud to Randi and Danielle. The first one is around actually risk tolerance. And if your risk tolerance has changed to the extent where you feel like you could enter the market now, is now a good time to do that? And what considerations should be made if one chooses that route?
So maybe I'll start on that one. The first thing I would say is that we've seen unprecedented volatility in the last 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, just in a 72-hour period, the market went down 30% when we finally realized, okay, COVID is here, it's here to stay. People are going to fall ill and we need to do something. That said, today, the market's only off 11%. And I'm not saying that's not a real number, but it's very far from some of the concerns that, are we in a 2008? Is the market going to be down 50, 60% like we saw then? And we've come back a long way from the down 30% where we were just a month ago. So all of that is to say, if your risk profile has changed and you have that cash buffer that Randi mentioned earlier, and you're comfortable putting a little bit more money in the market, what we're talking to clients about is what we call dollar cost averaging. And that's just a fancy way of saying leg in. Don't do it all at once. If you see a down day, put some dollars in. There's no magic number or percentage or way to do it other than, if $5,000 is what you want to put into the market, think about doing it in 2, 3, or 4 tranches, and maybe over a 3 to 6 month period. Just don't do it all at once. But yes, the market is down, so sure, put a little bit of money in. That's what we've done for clients, and then we sort of sit and wait and see, and wait for another downturn, which personally I do think we'll see.
Our next question, Randi, in the beginning, you mentioned the psychological aspects of buying toilet paper. And the question is around Randy, you mentioned toilet paper. What are the implications of panic purchasing in the sense of how we all think about budgeting for our households right now?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't know who said that. That is a fantastic question. I myself am on a toilet paper hunt. We go to the store once a week and we try to pick which one we think has it. And we go and we have lucked out so far. So funny story about that. I was on Amazon and I found toilet paper. It was this no-name toilet paper called Seaboard or Sea something. And I said, oh my gosh, it's there and it's not saying out of stock. I clicked on it and the delivery date was May 24th. And I was like, well, I don't think that that's going to help it for the moment. But you know, it's a good question. I think that stores are now finally getting on board with limiting people in their buying, saying, you know, limit 1 per person or limit 2 per person on everything that's meats and produce and everything. So I think it's going to help slow that panic buying down. I think my fear, what I think about, and again, don't have a crystal ball, so don't know where this is going, but, you know, is this going to be impactful to food distribution, farming? You know, I saw something on 60 Minutes last week that talked about how farmers can't get their workers to come and pick their fields. And if that happens, their crops go bad. And then not only what happens to the farming industry as a whole, but what kind of shortages will we be seeing? And I think that that's more of a longer term. I don't think anyone's really concerned about that happening in the very, very near term. But I think it's something we have to solve for. And I'm hoping these stimulus packages that are supporting workers and supporting businesses to keep running, especially the essential workers, are still happening.
Another question, the stimulus packages and the details and restrictions around them seem to be changing on a daily basis. There's a perception that they're changing on a daily basis. What have you been advocating to your clients is the best way to, number 1, stay informed, and number 2, learn more about what's available to them, say that you are a business owner and going through struggles right now, understanding and trying to come to terms with the possibility of laying people off?
The truth is, it's really hard, and I wouldn't say that they're changing drastically, but if you think about, as part of the CARES Act, the small business loans that they released last week to small businesses, there was a last-minute change in the application that threw all of the banks, turned them upside down, and it was really confusing for everyone, and I think created some panic because of the $350 billion that's part of the CARES Act that's to go towards small businesses. It's essentially first come, first serve right now. So chances are that figure is going to have to go up, and we're going to have to make more resources available. But, you know, one place to go for resources is the SBA website. Personally, I find that really confusing. We've got some resources that we can certainly share with this group once we're off this, that I think break down the differences between the 2 different loans that you can get and make it a lot more straightforward, because it is really confusing. And I think even a lot of banks, particularly if you bank at one of the larger institutions like a Bank of America, it's really hard to get someone on the phone right now. That's something that we've heard from a lot of our clients. If you're with a regional bank, it's certainly been easier. So one of the things we've done for clients is just try to play that middleman as best we can. But there are resources, and we'd love to share them if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful, Danielle. Thank you so much for that. Are those available on your website, or if you forward those to us, and we can make sure to get that out to our viewership and our ecosystem as well?
There's one article that's up there, but there's more that I think, particularly if you're a small business owner, really break it down in a much more understandable and digestible way that we'll share with you after. And you can disseminate.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, because there's so much content and so much information that's repurposed and repackaged in so many different ways. It makes it confusing what really is available versus what's not, and what's duplicated in the sense of information sharing. Here's another question. This is a really good one. Okay, if the strategy is to spend a little bit at a time while the market is down, what are some ways to invest in yourself if you're not in the market? And what have both of you been doing to invest in yourself professionally and personally during this time?
Invest from a financial standpoint, like what actually to invest in?
Or investing in yourself in the sense of, I think this you're maybe getting at the point of professional development, because we hear from our ecosystem right now that so many of us are spending time and money on professional resources to better ourselves, right? From either a hard skill or a soft skill perspective, or learn a new language, or take the time out to learn photography or whatever that is. And have both of you had time to do that yet? And if so, what ways have you found it to be fulfilling?
Yeah, I think the management of the transition between work and home is still going on for me. I have a full house right now. We have a lot of resources internally. Our strategic advisors, we have a group of strategic advisors who are in-house trust and estate attorneys. I think there's 17 of them in total, and they have done a really great job of what Danielle had said, breaking down that CARES Act and really doing some educational pieces for all of us within the firm. And then our portfolio management team, we're on the phone with our research analysts and our PM teams to just trying to get a sense of, global and economic markets at the moment. So I think from a standpoint of helping us to educate clients, we're trying to look, at our internal partners and share resources. Danielle, I don't know if you have something to add to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably answer going in a polar opposite direction in terms of how I've thought about using this time to better myself and try to identify how this time has certainly brought to light some of my weaknesses. I don't love uncertainty. I don't love a lack of structure. And certainly this is a time that tests all of that. And our firm has been really great about sharing certain resources personally, things like, online exercise classes, meditation for Randi, help me out with this if you remember, because I'm definitely going to forget the name of it, but there is a New York meditation podcast that has now made themselves free for all New Yorkers in this period. And the ultimate point I'm trying to make is this is a time that I've tried to do some things to sort of level set my own mind and not get too caught up in all of the negativity that you do hear about at this time.
Another question from our viewership. What would you tell your 16-year-old self about this time period?
That's a really good question as well. It is interesting because no one on this call, right, has ever been through a time like this. So I don't even think if I told my 16-year-old self this would happen, I would even believe myself. So given that, because it's sort of unimaginable where we are. And we talk about like the 2008 financial crisis, and it was a crisis, but we were all still able to go to work and to all be in community with one another. This is that on steroids. So I think I would just tell my 16-year-old self, if I could go back and say, you will come out of this. And I think about the 16-year-olds who are on social media, binging on Netflix. They're going to run out of things to binge, right? And they're going to run out of, social media is going to become boring. So I almost think this is sort of a self-taught thing where, they're going to come out of this, and adults as well are going to come out of this, with much more value of personal relationships. And again, if you haven't watched Tiger King, you should, because that's probably the last of the binge watching. But that's where we are. But yeah, I think, my 16-year-old self, I would just say, hang on and just be with your parents, be with family and really value that time together. As Danielle said, it's a time to sort of level set who we are and where we can make improvements. I think I'm a better mom because of this balance for sure. I came into this thinking, this work-life balance will be much easier because I'm in the house, and I find it harder. But at the same time, as Danielle said, I have put in a schedule over the last 5 weeks that have allowed me to, when I'm at work, I am 100% doing a great job at work. And when I'm at home, down the stairs, I'm doing 100% great at mothering and at parenting and being a good wife. So I think creating that balance is a really important thing.
Yeah, I think Randi really hit the nail on the head with all of that. My 16-year-old self, social media really wasn't a thing. But I would reiterate, get off your phone, be with your family, be with your friends in however you can in virtual land, and talk to people. Take advantage of this time, because it's probably not going to happen again in this exact way. So my family, when I was growing up, we always did family dinner, and I would always just want to go and do something else. But enjoy the family dinner, because you don't get that time back.
I think you're both absolutely right in the sense of just understanding and having a greater level of appreciation for those who are close around us, no matter if we're under the same roof with them right now or doing things like this and digitally connecting. It's interesting because at Mayshad, we've been thinking through strategically how we can also provide support and comfort, and then also provide spaces and places for women to be able to share what they're going through right now, but then also keep the eye on the longer term to ensure that when this all comes full cycle, that we're really prepared for the ways in which industries and verticals are going to be transformed tremendously. So when we think about, those of us who are business owners or run companies or senior executives, the world of work could be very dramatically different on the other side of this, pertaining to just even how we work, right? Like our movers going to be working from home on Mondays and Fridays and not going into the city every day. Will we be seeing that the environmental impact of this is so tremendous that there's a definite value to not having as many cars on the roads every day, to just taking more time to really ask, Randy, to your point earlier, just how are you feeling? How are you doing? And thinking through how many times in the last few years have we not taken those extra minutes just to be able to ask those questions? One of the things that we're doing at Mayshad is that we just this week launched a new digital membership to do just that. And so for those of you out there who would love to be a part of what we're building, in addition to all the live streams that we're doing here every week, we've opened up some opportunities for women as members to be able to connect with each other through workshop series, through small group discussions that we're calling Brain Trust, where we bring together small groups of women to have conversations to be able to work on our businesses and our careers together. And we feel like, given the strength and just the authenticity of what we were able to build last year with all of us in the face-to-face setting, that there's such a craving right now to rise above all of the other clutter and noise that's out there from a content perspective. Excuse me, and to be able to add real value to our community. I don't know about all of you, but every time I cough, I'm afraid that the world is judging me or questioning. It's not a cough, it's allergies. I promised everyone out there. So last parting words from Randi and Danielle. Any other tips or helpful hints that you can provide to our audience as we navigate the next few weeks? And of course, we'd love for you to come back and share with us updates in the next few weeks as well, but just parting words from each of you in the sense of how are you staying inspired and energized during this period of time?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think for me, what works for me is every day I do a silver lining. So I sit and I think about, yes, this is not a great time. This is not what I want to be doing. And I want my old life back. But what has emerged in my new life that has been really positive? And I have a really good long running list, and happy to share that. It doesn't include toilet paper because I still don't have it. But there's a lot of good that's going to come out of this. And this is my thing. I've always been one to not ask for help and to just be that strong face. And even if I'm breaking down on the inside, if someone says to me, "How are you doing?" "Great, how are you?" And I could be wreaking havoc in my head, or something chaotic could be going on in my life, but my answer was always, "Great, how are you?" And now I'm okay to be vulnerable. I'm okay to say, "I'm not really great today. I'm having a really hard day." Or someone in my family is having a really hard day and I don't know how to help them. And I think that's okay. I think giving yourself that permission to not be okay at times, but then to own it, to name it, and then to pick yourself back up and figure out how to move forward, even if you can't fix it.
I think that was incredibly well said. What I've tried to do in the moments where I feel very out of control and too in my head is I've just tried once a day, take a walk, even if it's 5 minutes, because that's all that I can do. And similar to what Randi said with the silver lining, think about something positive that has happened that day or is coming out of this period, be it time with my daughter or time with my husband who normally travels. And, I know that we're going to share this after, but there's some really good podcasts as well. Something I typically don't have or make a lot of time to listen to, but now that I seem to have more time and also less time at the same time, I've found time for podcasts, and there's some really great resources out there as well. And also, just finally, Randi said this, but talk to people. When I get scared about what's going on or I feel alone and it all seems unmanageable, I just talk to someone, call a friend, talk to a family member, my husband, and get through it.
Randi and Danielle, you both had mentioned other resources such as podcasts. Let's mention them briefly here for the people that are watching right now, and then we can repeat those at the end of the broadcast as well.
Sure. So one of the ones that I had mentioned when we all were together at our last event, when we did our panel discussion, was a podcast by Farnoosh Torabi called So Money. And there are 2 episodes that I think are really, that were done more recently that are really great to listen to. One is episode 1022, and it's your latest coronavirus money questions. And the other one is episode 1026 called Regaining Control of Your Life. And she had a guest speaker on with named Susie Moore. And I think both of those are really great to just sort of listen to and to sort of, digest. And then what I was thinking of is something that our firm does for our colleagues. And when I went to go look at it, it was a little bit different than what we're doing at Brown Advisory. But I don't know if you know Dave Ramsey, but he runs a program called Smart Dollar. And when I looked at Smart Dollar, it looked like it was geared towards employees and businesses. But he does run something called Financial Peace University. And it's daveramsey.com, and you can look at the classes there. And it's everything from budgeting to getting out of debt to even starting a small business. So I think it's just really good. He gives really good practical advice. He's really entertaining to listen to, and it's just a good platform for learning, not necessarily podcasts, but it's more of a e-learning kind of tool. And Danielle had one that was really great as well.
Yeah, I really like Her Money with Jean Chatzky. I find all of them are very approachable. She released one last week, which was How to Make Good Decisions in Uncertain Times, which had a lot of very tangible things that you can do today if you're having a hard time during this period.
Randi, Danielle, thank you so much for being with us here today. And thank you to everyone who's out there and for all the work that you're doing, no matter if you're on the front line, keeping businesses running and people employed, to reinventing yourself during this period of time. Thank you so much. Please join us Monday at 4 p.m. for Dr. Risa Reiger, and we will look forward to seeing you. Oh, also, please make sure to visit joinmayshad.com to learn more about all of our live streams next week, as well as our membership. We would love, love, love to have you be a part of what we're creating together, because right now, particularly during this period of time, we really do believe that we are stronger together. I'm Jan Mercer-Doms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Mayshad Choice. We will see you soon. Thank you so much.